And now we are finally all the way around. So this was going to be a how-to video on how to thread a bolt handle for a Rem 700, but it's also going to be kind of a PSA, if you will, or a review on the PT&G Phase 2 fixture for holding these. It's not good. At least I'm not happy. With the amount of money I paid for that fixture, it took like 3 months to come in, even though on their website it didn't say it was out of stock. I called and got excuse after excuse. Typical PT&G stuff, you know, oh, it's shipping out next week, a month later I still don't have it. Oh, we're waiting on Blue and Chemicals. I just wish that they would have accurate lead times on their website, and if it said it will take 4 months, it'll take 4 months. But when it doesn't say that it's in stock or not in stock, that's kind of annoying. But here is some video showing what's involved to actually machine one of these. The first one I did came out pretty bad. This is for an action that I built a long time ago for myself, actually, probably 10 years ago at least. And it has a giant casting flaw in it. I'll take a close-up picture of that. I've heard of it before, but I've never actually seen it. And this is pretty bad, but it's not enough that it's going to break it. There's still plenty of meat. If it does, I can try the other technique of cutting it off and drilling and tapping and TIG welding in a piece of rod, which I might want to do eventually to this one anyway, because the reason I'm not happy with this tool from PT&G, it does clamp it, it does hold it securely. What I did was I indicated off the round part of the base that fits in the chuck, because I presumed that PT&G would machine the thing square and even and in a way that you could indicate it. So I trusted it, and I shouldn't have. But because this is a cast part and it's a big round knob sticking out, it's kind of hard to measure it, and it's at an angle. So it looked okay, but I will take some close-up pictures and you can see that some of this is not fixable and some of it can be indicated. So what I did is, on the second one, I actually went by eye, and originally it was indicated, and I lined up my live center to the end of the bolt handle, and I could see the casting line and tell that it was off. So I, just by eye, moved it around till I got it where I felt it was fairly centered. And by the looks of the casting line, it is. And I'll take some close-up pictures and you can see the difference between these two. This is the first one, this is the second one. And it's really hard to get it to show up on camera, but it's much better. I'll take a side-by-side comparison of them. One thing I'm still not happy with is the angle that this sits at. It's not in line with the bolt handle. Again, I would assume that would be machined at the correct angle. That's the whole point of the fixture, but it's not. But here's some footage showing what's entailed. Another thing to keep in mind if you're going to try and do this at home is I didn't single point thread these, which I do feel like if you're not single point threading and you're using a die, you're kind of cheating. But because it's such a small diameter and there are casting flaws, matter of fact, this is a brand new current production Remington, this gun right here, and it has a pretty good sized hole in the casting. Again, it's not enough to really affect it. This is a little 223. I'm sure it's not going to be an issue, but it's still there. I'm kind of surprised. You would think after all these years they'd get the casting better. But back to single point threading versus using a die. If you're running a lathe, running a die over something is kind of cheating. It's cutting corners. I chose to use a die on these instead of single point threading for one very specific reason. It's a small diameter thread to begin with. Number two, and this is the most important reason, when you single point thread you have to have a relief cut, and that relief cut is going to be smaller than the major diameter. It's an area for your cutting tool to land in when you shut off that drive. The part's still spinning, but the cutter needs a place to stop. So I thought, with this only being a 5/16 thread, I don't want to have it be weaker already than it has to be. So by running a die, it maintains as much material as possible. So you want to be able to install a threaded bolt handle on your bolt for your Remington 700. This is a PT&G Phase 2 fixture. I learned how to do this on somebody else's equipment, and I finally broke down and bought one, and I assumed that this would be board centered. It is not. So the first thing I did was I went ahead and indicated the shank, and you'll see it runs true. But the bolt handle will not be true, and I'll show you why. This is not, when they machined this, they did not machine this centered in the tool. I don't know if there's a reason for that. I would kind of assume that PT&G would make this perfect. This is a cast part. There are going to be some variances, but it was off a lot, the first one that I did. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strip this bolt down and put it in, and we'll show you how much it's off. Trying to find a good angle to show this, and I can't show everything because YouTube thinks it's too dangerous for people to know too much. So I got to be careful what I show. Some of this I'll show and fast forward. Also, something to keep in mind, some people will grind these down to save wear and tear on tools. If you're using a tool like this, yeah, you're gonna beat the crap out of it. It's got a very tight radius on the nose. It's not gonna stand up well. For taking most of the meat off, I'm gonna use an insert that's much more robust. It can take this beating, it's not gonna hurt it. But there's a reason why you actually don't want to grind these, and that's because you want to try to use this casting line. There's a parting line on here, and you can use this to help you center this to make sure that it's actually going to come out correctly. If we draw an imaginary line through our live center, we can see that that is not centered. It's actually going to come off to one side. And if we look at our parting line, we can see that the tool is going to end up way lower. Our center is showing us that the part is high. This one actually looks a little bit better than the last one that I did as far as being centered. The other one was off a lot more. But now we'll go ahead and we will adjust the forejaw so that we can have this centered. So when we cut this, our bolt handle will actually come out centered. You can see it's making its way around, but we're still not touching the other side yet. You can always cut more, but you can't take some and put it back on. So I'm probably gonna come closer to this edge when I change out to a finer insert, but I might adjust this more and come a little closer. We'll just play it by feel. Now we are finally all the way around. Not sure how far I'm going to get up into that edge. Our surface finish is starting to suffer a little bit. But it doesn't matter because we're going to clean that up with a nicer insert anyway. We're just getting the bulk of the meat off right now. That is about as far in as I'm going to come before I switch to my other insert, and you can see it looks pretty centered all the way around. We'll take a measurement, see how much more we got to go. Yeah, we still got about almost 90 thou. So we'll switch to our other insert. So I cleaned up down to my final dimension, 3125, faced it off put a chamfer on it. Spared you the details on that. And now I am actually going to use a die to cut this instead of single point threading it. And the reason for that is if I take more material out for a relief cut, I'm going to weaken this material even more. And these are known for having issues once in a while, so why take chances? And this gives me an excuse to use the new tool that I just bought, because I like tools. And I had, let me get my carriage out of the way, I had a tailstock die holder, but it wasn't very good and it was old and it's seen some years, so I decided to buy a new one because I like tools. I locked out my lathe so it can't move, and just go ahead and get your die on there. The nice thing about a tailstock holder is it will center everything. So give her a little bit of gentle pressure while you start it. Also, make sure you use an adjustable die. Don't buy a cheap die, because cheap dies will give you bad threads. This allows you to control the diameter of your threads. And if you did it right, this should screw on. Barely moves, which is good because you don't want it to bind. Unlock the lathe. And she looks pretty nice and centered. And as centered as that is, it's still not as perfect as I would like. I wish I could indicate this somehow, but the only way really to do that would be to make a tool that will fit in here that has a cylinder, then you can indicate the cylinder. But that's not really practical. But it looks perfect. Remember, this is something anybody can do at home. Go out there and get some tools and get dirty and have fun.